the United States?
Well, as I said before, these people were denied their freedom years ago, but you have to have, you tend to have a short memory on the actions taken by the United States.
Denied their freedom by the United States?
Years back. Yes, sir, they did. As a matter of fact, their freedom was compromised. Their freedom was negotiated as to obtain the taking the missiles out of Cuba in 1962.
All right, let's bring in Michael here for a second. Seems just a little unusual reasoning to say they were denied their freedom back in 1962, so people today who may not even been alive in 1962 should be allowed into this country. When Haitians are automatically turned back, there's a disparate policy, which I feel is very unfair, Michael.
If you pull the lens back...
Hold on, Jose. Michael's up. Hold on.
If you pull the lens back in the whole landscape, this is politically charged from the first instance. Haitians cannot come to the United States, and Cubans, if they even set foot on a dry land, even a marsh area or something, would be U.S. soil, and they would be given more rights. The question is, ultimately, are we going to invent laws that fit our business interests? The State Department has business with Saudi Arabia, will rarely find the political asylum application lodged in that country, but when it comes to Cuba, because we have a political agenda, things are a little different.
But it's not, it's more than that, and welcome back to the program.
Pleasure.
Jose, good to see you, my friend. How are you? It's Sean Hannity here.
Good to see you too.
I want to roll some of this tape here, and here's the problem, and here's the distinction, and here's the difference. And Jose, you correct me if I'm wrong. These gentlemen, we're going to send back because of this idiotic, imbecilic, wet foot, dry foot law that we have. Where are they going when they get back to Cuba, Jose? They're going to jail. And there's a very strong likelihood these people are going to be tortured, and there's even the possibility they're going to be murdered. Am I wrong?
You are correct. This is the possible luck of these people if they return.
Jose, we're Americans. We cannot, in good conscience, allow that to happen to these guys. I don't like illegal immigration. I want people to only come here legally. But with that said, knowing what's going to happen to these guys, I don't think we, in good conscience, can send them back.
Not only that, Sean, one of the concerns that I have is that we're diverting our resources from tracking terrorists. We right now have the Coast Guard. We've seen people who have actually purposefully injured themselves in order to make it to dry land so that they would have these rights.
I know, but you're on the risk, Jose, of the Mario Boatlet, that they open up the gates, the criminally insane, they'll be sent to America, and then we've got, you know, a whole host of societal issues we have to deal with. So we don't want a situation like that. But there's reasons that people are getting in rickety boats and shark-infested waters and inner tubes, risking their lives to come to America.
Yes, and it's a complex issue. Let me tell you why. Castro is using the fear that the U.S. has of a wave of immigration coming here to the shores of Florida to threaten the United States and to blackmail him too. So some of these things you see sometimes are orchestrated by Castro himself.
Jose, didn't Castro infiltrate your organization? Because you have a group, Brothers to the Rescue, and you fly these waters and you try and help out, you know, these people that are in the at sea in under difficult circumstances. And didn't it result in the murder of several of your pilots?
We lost 4 men. 2 of our airplanes were shot down in international airspace by MiGs from Cuba, from Castro, and to this date, there has been no criminal indictment against Castro or the people that perpetrated this murder.
Pick it up right there in just a second. Jose, hold on, and then Mike will come right back. Let's first go to Washington. Greta Van Susteren standing by with a look at what's coming up immediately following Hannity and Colmes. What are you looking at tonight, Greta?
And disturbing news, the big question tonight, is Iran creating a huge weapons arsenal of biological weapons, plus the...
Still to come tonight, Geraldo Rivera has some breaking news, and I'll have the very latest. We'll give you the results of the autopsy, what he's been able to find out as relates to Lacey Peterson and her unborn baby, Connor. Now we get back to our debate. All right, Michael, here's the deal. I mean, look at the video again. I mean, I watched this for an hour today as it was unfolding. I was watching John Scott this morning, as I always do. And I'm watching this thing. I'm watching this guy for an hour. He's treading water, and he's treading water, and he's a mile and a half from the coast. There's no way he's going to make it. I mean, the Coast Guard is doing their job. I'm thinking, number one, the policy is insane. There is a double standard. But what other alternative do we have? Can we just turn a blind eye to what this man is going to face when he goes back?
Sean, this is a huge international game of tag, and it's just unfortunate, you know, the wet-dry rule. Are we coming in within 12 miles of international waters, 3 miles of U.S. territorial waters? The question is Lady Liberty a few miles from this studio standing there like a stopping guard saying you can come through, you can't come through? We need to have a uniform rule because right now we have an immigration service that was laid vulnerable post 9/11, is trying to regroup itself, and we have to be good to these good people. They're coming with the best of intentions.
I'm not blaming the people. You know something? I think they are doing what most Americans would do if they found themselves, Jose, in these circumstances, where you have a brutal, murderous regime, and, you know, with a little luck, Castro may drop dead in the next few years, and the people of Cuba will be free again. We can all hope. But in the meantime, I understand why the people are doing this. But you have some Americans standing back, Jose, and they say, well, we've got to control our borders for national security reasons. And I'm one of those people saying that. But there's got to be some exceptions to the rule, and this is one of them.
And that's precisely what we have here, an exception to the rule because of special circumstances with the Cuban people that had to do with U.S. policy in the 60s.
But Jose, forgive me for interrupting, Jose. That gets very dangerous when we make exceptions for one group.
But no, you cannot make comparisons. You have to look at it on an individual basis. If you know you're going to send that guy that's in that water who only is coming to America, please help me, I've been oppressed my whole life, and we're going to send them back to hell and send them back to torture and prison, what are you going to do? You have to make an exception.
I'm not saying that we should do that, but if we're going to make exceptions, we ought to be making exceptions and for the Haitians.
Exactly. Let me bring it to Jose. Jose, if this idea, I think Michael's exactly right. If we're going to say this is a brutal regime, and there are many brutal regimes, and people want to come to America, don't we have to do the same thing for anybody coming here from Iran, anybody coming here from North Korea, anybody coming here from Syria? And then we have an open-door policy for anybody from a country we deem a dictatorship, and Cuba is on a list of terrorist nations in our State Department, so that we open the borders to anybody from these countries because they're in brutal regimes.
The Cuban people earn that exception. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
But not just the Cuban people. I'm not just talking about the Cuban people. If we apply that to Cuba, don't we have to apply it to every country where there's a brutal regime?
No, this is not only a brutal regime.
Why only to Cuba?
The errors in politics of the United States in its relations with Cuba originated the conditions for the refugees.
But Jose, my question is, why would we apply it only to Cuba? If we're going to apply that principle universally, it doesn't get applied only to Cuba because it's got a brutal regime. We would have to then, to be consistent, apply it to brutal regimes all over the globe, right?
You don't have to make a universal policy for everybody. There are different cases. There are different exceptions to rules that you make. Rules are made by men, and anything that's made by men has errors in it.
Jose, we're standing in a country of laws. There are students, clerics, diplomats that are here illegally and should not be on U.S. soil. And unfortunately, until we discover a way to treat everybody equally, we're going to end up having a country with exceptions.
And by the way, Haiti's got a brutal regime sometimes. It has been in and out of brutal regimes.
You know, I had the privilege of serving at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I worked on the Haitian refugee case, and my colleagues were always arguing, they're here for economic gain, they're here for economic gain. And when the change of government changes, then all of a sudden people begin to think, well, maybe there's a political exception. We're not about giving political exceptions.
So what should the rule be? Everybody comes in who wants, or we keep everybody out?
We pull the lens back, we look at the whole landscape, and we figure out a judicious way. If we're going to interdict, and we're going to create an authority to actually take people, then we're going to create a measure of how we're going to do that, and people will be given due process rights,
Michael, or
we don't do it.
And Jose,